If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This is another of our popular Listener's Choice interviews, which we're playing over the weekend. We've chosen the most popular interviews for you to select the Listener's Choice winner. If you're not sure how the Listener's Choice competition works, have a look at horsechats.com/choice for the rules and the leaderboard. Our guest today is Dr. Peter Huntington. Dr. Peter Huntington received a veterinary degree from the University of Melbourne in 1981 and then worked in an equine practice in Berwick, Victoria. He then joined the Department of Agriculture in Victoria as a horse specialist veterinary officer. While he was there at the Department of Agriculture, he conducted research and investigation into nutrition of horses. Since then, he's done extensive research into the nutrition of horses. He's the author of a popular book, Horse Sense, The Guide to Horse Care in Australia and New Zealand, and is also the author of many articles and papers on a variety of topics related to equine nutrition. So hopefully we'll get some great goss about equine nutrition today. How are you, Peter?
Excellent. Thanks, Glenys. Good to be speaking with you.
Good to talk to you too, Peter. Now, Peter, a favourite quote. Now, this quote may not be something that's quoted from someone, but could be something that you're saying often to people. So what have you got for us?
Well, I think you never stop learning about horses. You can be with them, I've been working with them for a long time, and you keep learning something all the time. So I think that's my favourite quote or mantra, that you'll never stop learning.
I think, coming from someone who graduated in 1981 and has just kept going with research and research and research since then, I think, it's your mantra, but it's what you do.
It is, and I think, you find different things. I mean, common things are common and they keep recurring, but you find new situations and horses, remembering that horses are individuals and in lots of aspects, but certainly in feeding, you need to remember that, to feed them as individuals rather than, you can't feed or handle or manage every horse the same.
Yep.
So that's an important part of that.
Peter, you went to uni and you became a vet, but what was your start with horses? What was your first memories when you first had contact with horses? Have you got anything there?
Oh, I've got a bit of a memory of learning to ride when I was about, not quite 4 or something. My mother came from a farm at Rutherglen, and her younger brother, was very interested in horses, and he used to, use horses for cattle and sheep work, and also involved in rodeos and cutting and things like that. And so he taught me to ride early on, and I spent a lot of time in holidays up there. So that was my start. Then when I got into vet school, the horses were the only animal I was really interested in, and used to spend summers working, doing yearling prep and things like that on thoroughbred studs. And horses, as both a vet and then I guess as a nutritionist, horses are the only animal I've worked with. I have to get other vets to look at my dogs and things like that.
Okay. Now, from those times on your farm, were you always going to be a vet?
Oh, not necessarily. I think that possibly came later. Sometime during high school, that sort of solidified as an idea. Mm-hmm. And I like science subjects, and vet is one of those. And for the last few years, that was what I was keen on.
Yep.
But that's a long time ago, so it's hard to remember.
It's funny because when people have an affinity with animals, and particularly horses, especially if it comes from as a little bit of a surprise to, relatives and people away from them, and they say, oh, you'll have to be a vet. It's almost like they don't understand that there's a lot of other careers besides being a vet within animals and within, the horse industry. If someone's going to start to work in the horse industry, what do you think are the core skills or character traits that they need to work, not necessarily as a vet, but any job in the horse industry?
Well, I guess being a vet is only a very small part of those involved in the industry, like a tiny part. I think the core skills you need a fondness for hard work and ability to persist and to, learn off people with more experience than you. I think there's a bit of a mistake that people do courses, might do 1 or 2 year diploma or degree or some sort of education they get after school and then think they know everything. And you're not going to do that. So.
Yeah. I think anyone that's been in the industry, that's just your very first step. And even as a vet, I'm sure you get people that come out of vet school and they go into practice, but, that's practicing. That's for them to keep learning and keep educating.
Absolutely. I mean, I was the same as everybody else. You have a certain amount of knowledge, but and that keeps growing every year. So when you graduate as a vet or from a equine science course or something like that, your knowledge is minuscule compared to what it will be in years to come.
Yeah. What do you think's the best thing about working with horses and working in the horse industry?
Well, I think it's a combination of the horses themselves, fantastic animals, ability to work outside, and not being confined to an office, as many people have to suffer, and working with the people that are involved. Great, absolutely great people, and the efforts that they put in, the devotion they have, and the care that they have for their horses is incredible.
Yeah, and it's always nice mixing with people that have got the same, the same passion, the same interest, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the passion, and it's amazing in Australia and New Zealand particularly that how many people have that passion. And you go to other countries. I travel a lot, and you go to countries in Asia, and there are just so few people who have either had the opportunity or the interest in being involved in horses in the way that people are here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What about people? You've talked about your uncle, must have been, who got you started with horses. What about other people who've influenced you within your career?
Oh, I think there are a number of vets who were sort of mentors in my early days as a vet. So people like Professor Leo Jeffcott, Dr. Jeff Hazard, Lex Carroll. So these were people who were far more experienced than me, and I have spent time working with them and trying to soak up knowledge from them. In nutrition, a couple of my sort of colleagues at KER, Dr. Joe Pagan, who established the business in the US in 1988, is an incredible source of knowledge about nutrition, and Steve Jackson, Dr. Steve Jackson, who was a great practical horseman. So they're amongst those people.
Mm. And now, these days, do you find yourself mentoring other younger vets and other people about nutrition?
Oh, absolutely. That's part of what you do. So we have an advice team at KER, so that are giving advice to horse owners who contact us, and so we had a number of younger graduates come through that program. In the US, we actually have a sort of research internship program. People have done that and then gone on to then do degrees and masters and even PhDs following their involvement in that program. So that's sort of rewarding to see people develop their knowledge and skills.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that's changing? The knowledge about nutrition, horse nutrition, and also the ability to, I'm thinking about technology, the use of technology to get more accurate data. Do you use much in the way of technology to get the data to find more accurate results about nutrition?
Well, we use analysis of feeds, and we use computer programs to do things like assessments of nutrient requirements and how that is supplied by various feeds. I mean, technology is dangerous in the wrong hands, and I think one of the things that happened with the development of the internet and asking Dr. Google about things, there's a lot of information on the internet. It can be put up by anybody. You don't have to have qualifications or expertise. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's wrong, that's misleading, that's wrong, and sometimes actually dangerous. So people need to be able to filter the information that they read and look for credible sources of information rather than just one that sort of shouts the loudest from the rooftops.
And I think not just nutrition too. There's a lot of people who are well-meaning, who get on with their limited experience, with their, one horse that's had one problem, and they've, without correct scientific data, they can fix a problem, but it may be not what they were doing that fixed the problem. It may be There's lots of misinformation, not just about nutrition. Yes, I can certainly agree with you there. Okay, now what about horses? Has there been any horses that have influenced you, particularly making different decisions, different career-making decisions?
Well, I guess there are some horses that have a big influence for us. As some of the stallions that are on the big farms that we work with that are worth incredible amounts of money and can generate, massive incomes for the farm. So they're somebody you pay particular attention to. Some of the other individual horses, there's a great number of horses that you touch in a sort of lifetime working with them that have an influence. Some of the successful ones, the horses like Megan Jones' horse Jester, who was a silver medalist in Hong Kong, so we had quite a big involvement in his feeding and management over the years. Is one that comes to mind. A number of the really good endurance horses that people like Meg Wade has ridden, had a fair bit to do with some of those. Red Cadeau is one that does come to mind because he was an English horse that came to run in the Melbourne Cup, 4 times and ran second 3 times. And we designed feeds for him every year that were the same feeds as he was on at home and got them made in Australia. And so he was a fabulous horse. So, yeah, there's that type of horse that gives you a lot of satisfaction. At being able to help them and help their owners or managers or trainers feed them better.
Is that helping them? Is that your proudest moment, or have you got something else that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, no, I think it's helping horses, helping owners feed their horses better and through either advice or products or sort of management tips are the things that do make you proud, that you feel you've achieved something. So that's the sort of thing that you do. We're in a business that does have an involvement in products, but we want to give advice for that products about how to use them, how to feed their horses better, and so they have healthier, happier and better performing horses.
If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com.
What do you think? Because you talk to a lot of horse owners, and not just all race horses or all eventers or all endurance horses, but you talk to a lot of different owners about their horses across a variety of disciplines. What do you think is something that's fairly common across the disciplines that people can know? Thinking about our listeners and thinking about education and something they can take away and go, wow, that was a really good interview. I really enjoyed. I learned this. What would it be?
Well, I think it's not to make it too complicated, to try and keep feeding relatively simple. And feeding horses should be relatively simple. You start with the forage, which is sort of pasture and hay and chaff, and then you complement that with what other nutrients the horse needs, be it energy or minerals or vitamins, and then maybe you add some supplements for special needs. It shouldn't be as complicated as many people make it. And I think that would be one of the things I'd say, is that try and keep it simple and keep it as natural as possible. And I'm talking natural in terms of availability of forage, for example. So, the horse evolved. If you think of where the horse evolved, they were roaming herbivores. They graze for sort of 12, 16 hours a day. They exercise doing that. They walk, 7 to 10 Ks, maybe even more. And try and make the feeding program as natural as possible in those terms, rather than complicating it with too many additives to the feed bin.
Yep. Now, Peter, have you got something, and I know you've got your book, which is Horse Sense, the Guide to Horse Care in Australia and New Zealand. So we've got that one. Is there any other books that you'd like to recommend to our listeners to complement their knowledge about feeding and equine nutrition?
Possibly not so much a book as a website. We've got a website called Equinews, which is equinews.com, and that's got thousands of articles that are written in the same sort of fashion as Horse Sense, trying to be easy to understand, or tens of thousands of articles. So people can use that as a research if they want to look at one particular topic. So go in and search for the the key words of that topic, or we have a weekly newsletter called the Weekly Feed that comes out of that. You can sign up for that, and that's got sort of 3 or 4 articles a week that are either based on things about nutrition and health, current research, topics that are of interest to people. So that is a fantastic resource. And I mean, I've said that the internet can be dangerous, but I think something like that, we used to publish those things in books and magazines, but getting the distribution or printing enough of them or having them affordable was the challenge, whereas that is something where the internet has made information like that readily available to everybody for free.
And I think the recommendation coming from a vet who's a specialist in nutrition, who has studied nutrition pretty much his whole working life, I think that's a good recommendation on somewhere you can get the right advice from. Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. Now, what are you looking forward to at the moment, Peter? What does your future hold?
Well, the short-term future holds I'm off to Asia to do some work in China and Japan for a little while. And that's interesting because Australia is one of the easier places to feed horses. And if people have pasture, then, it's much easier than where you've got to lock horses up in stables all the time. So there's that side of the angle. So to some degree, so the future holds would be continuing to do research on issues that are facing horses, and there are new health issues that have developed in the last few years or become more apparent, and things like the epidemic of obesity amongst horses, and that can lead to a syndrome called equine metabolic syndrome that has a high risk of laminitis. So there's continuing to do research into areas like that, into areas like gastric ulcers, that are a very common problem affecting horses. So it's trying to increase our knowledge so that we can feed horses better and manage them better, and try and then to get the information out to as many horse owners as you can so that they can look after their horses better.
Just to do with the changes between Australia and Asia, to do with types of feed. I'm talking about generally, I know every horse is different, we're going to feed them different, but generally the availability of feed, the different conditions, the more stabling, the less turning out. What differences are there between feeding horses in Australia, say, and feeding horses in Asia? What availability of feed is there, and how does the diet change to still keep the horse healthy?
Well, they tend to have to feed, in Asia, feed a lot more concentrates to horses, often feeding lower quality hay or expensive imported hay, so they don't feed enough hay to their horses, or they don't tend to use chaff. You don't have to use chaff, but so that horses don't get as much forage. So there's often, you've got horses that are higher risk of colic, have got more gut problems, more gastric ulcers, more hindgut disturbances, and because of that, they're not as happy horses. So more behavioural issues. You get more horses that are light in condition because of that. Now, we have problems here with, I've said about horses getting too fat, and sometimes that relates to the quality of the pasture that horses have, where pasture has been developed for cows in particular is too potent for many horses. So sometimes I'm talking about benefits of pasture, but not every horse can cope with that. So you've got to be a bit careful there, definitely, particularly if you've got ponies or horses that are prone to too fat. But there are more issues, if you don't have pasture there, it's harder. The feeding is very much in charge. You're in charge, and they often make a mistake of, we feed a horse a hard feed, a couple of times a day. Well, we'll feed them hay twice a day, instead of saying, I want to have forage available in front of the horse 24 hours a day, which is what would be happening if the horse was in the paddock. And because if we do that, we have more problems. And that's where, I think too many horses here are stabled for too long, and they're stabled without access to forage.
Yep. Yeah, so you really about the natural availability and going back to the surrounding natural environment that horses have, and keep the forage and keep the walking and keep the movement. And yeah. Okay, and Peter, just in a few sentences, can you summarise your whole philosophy about feeding horses, nutrition with horses, just into a message for our listeners to take away?
Well, I guess it would be repeating some of the things I've already said, such as, trying to keep it as simple as you can, making sure you feed horses as individuals, making sure, you get the forage program right in particular, and be aware that you're adding concentrates and supplements only as required, and not overdoing that. You know, matching feed and work, and keeping an idea on looking at body condition of horses. And one of the research projects I was involved in a very long time ago as a young vet was looking at developing a body condition scoring system. And I think, you know, that's actually, application of that has made a big impact on how people manage their horses if they do it properly, because we don't all have the facilities to weigh horses. And even if we weigh them, we go, well, what's the ideal body weight? But if you look at body condition, you can assess, you know, how fat or thin the horse is and make adjustments to its feeding program accordingly. And unfortunately, I think, you know, show judges have got a lot to answer for in terms of demanding that show horses are too fat. They're unhealthily fat. So people need to overfeed them. And then when they overfeed them, they have to work the hell out of them before they go in the ring. And so I think, you know, horses, seeing ribs is a good thing in horses. So I'd like to, you know, people to keep their horses lighter rather than think to keep them too heavy. Yeah. It's interesting about, you know, we talk about dressage and the way horses go, and it really comes back to the judge, because people are trying to, if they've got performance horses, they've got to go back, and the judge is making the ultimate decision. So they do have a lot to answer for. Yeah. Just to keep things on track. Yeah. Absolutely. And, you know, horses are living longer, but, you know, we don't want their joints to wear out and things like that. So, you know, keeping them fitter rather than fatter would be one of my mantras about looking after horses. Yep. All right, Peter. Now, how can people contact you? Well, I think if they contact me through Kentucky Equine Research, we've got an advice line with a 1-800 number, 1-800-772-198, or advice@ker.com, and they can get to me through those sort of resources. I'm happy to talk to people or email them about issues. Great. So that'd be the best way of getting in touch with me. But I'd again sort of say, in terms of a resource with information about nutrition that is general, then looking at the Equinews website, searching according to a keyword, or signing up for the weekly feed electronic newsletter will provide you with a great ongoing sort of knowledge, great ongoing resource in terms of knowledge and developing your skills about feeding horses. But if you have specific questions, then we're very happy to talk to you about those. Okay. Look, that's brilliant, Peter. I think all of those contact details, as well as the equinews.com and the weekly feed, will be on our website at horsechats.com. It'll be horsechats.com/Peter Huntington, or go to horsechats.com, search for Peter or search for Huntington. We'll put the doctor in front of your name when we do it, but we don't put it on your leg, Peter. So we certainly recognise that you're well qualified to talk within your field. And thanks very much for talking to us today. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people following you up from there. Thank you. Okay, thanks for the opportunity. Bye. Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College. Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com, and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.